Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently January 31st, 2010, and this is Day 9 Daily, number 59. Hello, everybody. How fares it this fine Sunday evening? I just had to let you guys in on the current situation. What I wanted to do was Leta against Kal on Tornado, but it hasn't been uploaded to YouTube yet. Every single game has been uploaded from the STX Seoul versus NBC. Or excuse me, the STX Seoul versus Height match, except for Game 6. This is what we're going to do. We're going to watch Game 4. We're going to do Kal versus Gogo. And if the upload finishes by that time, we'll go ahead and do Set 6 from that match, which was Kal versus Leta. And if not, we'll just do Match 5, which was Kal versus Hogel. So we're going to do a little bit of action-packed little junk going on today. So I am going to go ahead and try to reset everything up to analyze the other match, to analyze this game against Gogo on Moonglade, which I actually have not seen. I only saw the game against Kal on Tornado, and I sincerely hope we get the chance to look at that one, because that game was totally sweet. So let's go ahead and transition right on over to this main screen here. And I'm going to mute the chat, and I'm going to clear it to let everyone know that we are doing Kal versus Gogo on Moonglade. I love that I have the ability to do that. Yeah. So here's Moonglaive. Probably the most important thing I would state about this map is, let's imagine again that we're Protoss here at the right and we have our little Terran buddy opponent here at the left. Maintaining control of this region right here is super key. Because really, if you don't have control of this, you don't have any ability to, take any other expansions. You kind of lose your ability to be aggressive. You need to be able to have an ability to crush this area. So you'll see a lot of players, right when a push is coming, you'll see Protoss just start faring units down here, so that way they can crunch it from below, or even swing around back, or even go up here for a counterattack. I don't really want to spend too much time over-analyzing the map, because I want to go ahead and get started, because I'm going to try to keep tabs on that YouTube upload as much as possible. So that way we can do that Leta versus Kal match, because that game was so totally sweet. If it gets uploaded in the next 4 seconds, then I might switch over, but alas, not. It's actually really funny. Starting around 6:40, I got on, and I was on YouTube, and they only had the first 4 sets uploaded, so I kind of kept hitting F5, and then suddenly they had the 5th set uploaded, I don't know, maybe 5-6 minutes ago, so I'm hoping by some miracle that the 6th set will upload in time, so yeah. Here we go, we have Gogo, the little Terran buddy at the left, then we got the Kal and the Protoss in the bottom right. And this series is actually really impressive. This is from the Winners League. I actually believe this morning. And Kal just played absolutely beautifully. I mean, unbelievably impressive play. I mean, it's one thing to have a player who, is just really solid and can, win a game whenever they have a lot of practice and that sort of thing. But Kal is just put in 3 really weird games, into 3 really weird situations, and just, plays so well in all of them. Just, these outrageously nutty ways to just counter what his opponent's doing. There's Gogo. Oh, man. So, Gogo kind of has a bad habit of inadvertently placing command centers directly in front of his opponent's bases, which I think is a little bit bad manner. I'm, super against the bad manner in the games. So, so don't do that. I mean, it's kind of fun to just be able to, haha, I built a command center there. But, don't do that, because then you'll have to play in one of those pride matches against bests and you'll get smashed. But anyways, everything nice and normal going on here. I do like this sort of wall in. It gives us a ton of space to repair and not very much space for our opponent to attack it. When you see this sort of wall in on this map, I would almost certainly say that it's some sort of early expand going on. Here's some more hype members just blown away that they're actually at a match this morning. Just want to note a few extra things. This gas didn't used to be here on this map. It used to just be a mineral expansion. And this gives Terran a lot of opportunities to be aggressive, and if it screws up, to come back turtle here and then just start funneling tanks down this little bridge back here and expand there. So you'll see Terrans be a little more comfortable taking risks early on with aggression, because they can always fall back on that second expansion, that third base. And a Zealot coming out. Yeah, see, I love this style of play. Notice that Zealot popped out, and then the Cybernetics core just finished. Obviously, everyone knows that you're going for a Cybernetics core super, super, super quickly. And if any of you are looking to be a little bit more aggressive, you don't have to abandon your entire build to do that. Instead, you just make a Zealot while the Cybernetics core is building, and you cut probes. Not too many at all. I think just one or two. And then you go straight for the Dragoon after the Zealot is done, and in essence it allows you to get the Dragoon out at the same time you normally would, but you also have the opportunity to get this Zealot up. And see, look, a cool little 2-factory push on this map. That's what's nice about it, is again, you can do a nice little push, and then you're super, super, super turtled into your base. So you don't have to worry too much about struggling to get an Expo up. But yeah, this way to play that we're seeing Call do right here is a very nice way to just practice being very aggressive early on, because you get the Dragoon out at the same time you normally would, but you also have this Zealot there, only at the cost of a few probes, and you'll almost always get your opponent to pull so many SCVs off mining that it becomes okay in the end. There's Gogo once again, getting ready to build a command center. And see, this placement is really, really, really nice, because it's a nice big gap that you can get the Marine in and out, but not so big that you can let anything else in. And look how much repair space we have here. Oh, yeah. Nothing really too much to worry about right there. And one thing I'm noticing right here, there's Leta. They're zooming in on him because they want me to really do commentary. We're all just praying that we can get that video uploaded. Notice that there are no SCVs mining right here. It's a little bit difficult to do non-stop SCV production when you do some sort of 2-factory push. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say that the video I wanted to do has now been uploaded. So we're going to be doing Leta versus Call right after this. As promised, I just had to vamp for a little bit and watch-a-roo this little game. But, I'm sure everyone's always happy to hear a little bit more StarCraft in the morning. Or evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. For me, it's kind of in the morning. I took a nap after the Team Liquid Star League cast this morning, and I have just recently awoken. So it's a very dark morning here, 7 p.m. in California. I suppose I should focus a little bit more on the game, but as of now, everything's nice and happy and standard. The one thing that we do want to note, again, if we are doing this sort of 2-factory push, we're gearing to get a nice setup here. A lot of times what will happen is you can walk to here, and then you have a little bit harder time moving from here on forward. Just to note that. But yeah, once again, if you 2-factory and you go to here, you can always early expand after that first push. And you also will have a pretty easy time taking a third. A lot of players like doing that, going 2-factory push. Then when they expand, they get an add-on at the second factory, get an armory, and then they start gunning to take the third base relatively quickly. And see what that early Zealot does? Not only does it allow you to be aggressive, but it's so nice in dealing with these 2-factory pushes. I mean, Call still only has one gateway. He's getting ready to expand. Reaver coming out. I actually really, really like that play a lot. And see, look, that's so smart. You'll see the way that he was sending that probe. He was hugging around the bottom because he just wants to see if that expansion's coming up. That is the one thing that he is looking for. So, yeah, look, pulling guys back. He wants to make sure that he doesn't die to any sort of dropship play. Pulling everything back. Unfortunately, his opponent is not going dropship at all. Doing a nice little early factory push, a nice little bamboo push, I think is what it used to be called. We haven't really seen something like this in quite some time. The 2-factory, one with add-on, and then this push with a second tank and very few Marines. That's real unusual. Here the Vulture's trying to get up. I mean, look at that planning by Call. He's just there, ready to hold his ramp. No big deal. The mines are going to go down. He might end up canceling this. I'm curious to see what he'll do, because this is a relatively short game. And did he? Yeah, he ends up canceling it. I think that is a really smart choice to do, is to let it build as long as possible before you do anything at all. Whether it be to, cancel it normally at an expansion, but in particular here, letting it build as long as possible prevents this from happening for quite some time. And this is actually going to be real difficult for Terran to actually push up, because Terran I don't think has any siege mode yet. Whoopsie daisies. Just doing a little lift to Landaroo. And see, this, I dislike the choice of getting the add-on here. I think that's a significant mistake. Because let's think about the situation right now for a moment. We have we've just done a ton of damage to our Protoss opponent. We've killed off his expansion. We're almost certainly, in the lead. We have a bunch of stuff at his front. We know he's not going to attack us soon. We're getting our expansion up. Why would we be going for a drop, I mean, our opponent is going to be on one base for a while anyways. And really the only way he can put pressure on us is by doing some sort of, move like that. So I really would have liked a Wraith to come out way earlier or no starport at all. I mean, add-on I think is the worst choice. Because again, if you go dropship, you're against a one-basing player who's going to be prepared for getting harassed anyways. And by that I mean all his units are already right there in his base. So he's going to have a much easier time defending it. And one thing I loved about this Reaver drop is that he's dropping right in the path that the SCVs will run to. That's one thing that Stork talked a lot about in his OGN semifinal against Best, is the fact that his Reaver drops couldn't fail. They had to do maximum damage because he figured out locations to drop it, so that when the probes were running, they would still kill as many probes as possible. The Reavers would still kill like the maximum amount of stuff. And then look, we have the as absolutely many SCVs clustered as possible. And here comes the unload. I'm actually really surprised that GoGo didn't start moving those any earlier. But again, notice the same theme. Not dropping up here on the top, instead dropping right here underneath, because the SCVs will be having to run down this way if he goes to the expansion. So I mean, even though that Reaver got killed right there, still the two shots that it got right at the start of the drop, little play action Badooter thing, that just did so much damage. And re-expanding. Happily, normally, no big deal. And that's one thing that's incredibly admirable about Call these games, is the fact that Call is really good about just, not freaking out. He had to cancel his expansion. We're gonna see something similar in his games against Leta, but I mean, no problems at all. I think this is kind of an interesting choice to go for the Dark Templar that early on. I mean, it's very clear that GoGo's going to have absolutely no way to deal with this. But these are the sorts of things that you can do when you're on one base, because if you're just sort of holed up here in your main and you can't really get an expansion, what you need to do is spend your money in other ways, because you can't spend it on expanding or upgrading or doing something like that. You can't spend it on expanding or setting up other things around the map. You're just in your one base, so you can do tech, you can go for Dark Templars, you can add on more gateways. Oh, look at that, I pause it right as the game ends. Yeah, you can add on more gateways, you can do all the other things that are sort of what you were planning to do after the expansion. You can do it beforehand. Again, don't think of it as trying to get your order to happen exactly the way you want it. Instead, think of it as rearranging the elements of your play. So, for instance, if you were intending on going, here's a really simple one, to Gateway, then you expand, and then you go for Reaver. Go to Gateway, and then if they kill off your expansion, just go Reaver. And then after you kill everything off, then you expand. And then you're kind of, you're going to have a slightly less money than what you originally intended. But you have the opportunity to, oh cool, here's the game against Leta, fantastic. You're going to have slightly less money than you intended, but you're still going to be in a similar spot to what you've practiced, that you're going to have pretty much the same timings going on. So that's a very, very nice way to get into a favorable situation. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at Kal against, open up the wrong window. We're going to take a look at Kal against Leta. Now, Leta is like the superhero of Height Sparkies, right? He is unbelievably good. And a lot of times you'll kind of see Height relying a little bit too much on Leta, which is, always kind of funny. People always talk about, KTF is all Flash and Jaedong is all Hwasung. But really, people don't mention Leta enough. I think Leta's a lot more of a guy who carries his team than either of those players, either Jaedong or Flash. But, that's still saying a lot. He's like an incredibly, incredibly good player. So if we go over to the main screen, this is the map Neo Tornado that this game will be played on. And we're going to see Call spawn right up here and Leta spawn here. We're going to see Call remain very calm this game. But the one thing that I loved most is just the movement patterns. Because really, when I look at this map initially, these are the things I see. We get these 3 bases very easily. We get our second natural and our first natural very, very easily. We just pretty much defend this area. And when I look at this, I think of, another way to move into the center and a place to put tanks and place to, be defensive. So really, when I first looked at it, I saw this sort of movement path. I'm going to go from my main down to here. But what was so interesting is that this game's a demonstration of how this can actually be used as another movement set altogether. You can actually kind of take ring paths and just these little pods. The fact that there's this little bit of extra water that means that the distance from here to here is a little bit longer. It makes the movement a lot more roundabout, which means that if there's a big push coming here, running stuff along this way is an excellent option. I was actually really blown away. Call demonstrated an unbelievable ability to maneuver properly around on this map. This is so cool. This game was uploaded like 3 minutes ago. This is such good timing. Ihan timing, YouTube! Here's Call playing against Leta. And at this point in the game, Leta has just played a 40-minute game against Hogel on Roadrunner. That was a really, really nail-biting game. There's Leta for OG and Sparkies. Or Height Sparkies, excuse me. They're sponsored by a beer company now. My apologies. But, so Call, and see, that's kind of an interesting spot. How do you describe that? I mean, a lot of people would say, oh man, Call, he must be really, really tired after those first 2 games that he played. However, I kind of feel like you might be just now getting in the zone. You might be, your fingers are already really warmed up. You've kind of overcome the gitchy. You've overcome that initial feeling of tension and nervousness. We call that the gitchy because I've been reading Bone, the graphic novel, recently, and oh my god, that's so funny when Grandma gets the gitchy. So, for any of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I'll just leave it unexplained, so that way I can keep using it, because, man, that is a funny word. People cheering for their respective players. I didn't talk too much about openings on this map. The ones I think that are most noteworthy, whether it would be any sort of early expand. This is a pretty small area. But mainly it's the 4-playerness of the map. A lot of times, 2 gateway pushes, will be 2 factory players will be a little bit uncomfortable opening 2 factory because of these long push distances across map. You can get in some nice positions if you sort of advance up to here, but this isn't quite close enough to the natural to, have a 2 factory push exploit it all that much. And we do see a 14 Nexus. I really like 14 Nexus on maps that either have an unbelievably easy to defend expansion, or ones that are just 4-player and relatively large. So, for instance, this is a great example of this. Roadrunner, I think, is another great map to just do 14 Command Center on. It's going to be tough, really, to stop that. Oh, by the way, I meant 14 Nexus. And I say 14 Nexus, and you actually end up building it on 12, sometimes 13, depending on player preference. It's 14 Command Center that the Terrans do. But, I always say 14 whatever, meaning early expand. Sometimes I even say 14 hatch, but that's a little less common for me. And now, this response by Leta, I think that you can get away with doing this as a standard option. This, to me, does not seem cheesy. Sending a whole bunch of SCVs early on to bunker the expansion. One thing that is just brilliant as a tactic, notice the scouting SCV went all the way into the main and is now looping back around. So that way to give a little bit more time for all these things to regroup. And look at this. Oh, I love the fact that Leta has a very nice number of SCVs still mining. There are 6 SCVs here. Oh, actually, I'm going to pause the game so that way I can go into Procaster and type in, and now, Call versus Leta on Tornado. So that way everyone who's obs and knows what we're talking about. 6 SCVs, remember that number. It's a good number of SCVs to bring out to this attack. 6 more commonly known as 7. 6 extra SCVs, in addition to the scouting SCV. And, you know, everything that Call's doing is nice and normal. Getting the 2 gates. Probably going to be getting range real soon. You're kind of committed to going 2 gate and then getting range early on if you early expand, because that's really the only way you can hold off most 2 gateway. Oh, God, 2 factory pushes. So, and there's Leta with his infamous tongue out. His super focused tongue. And see Leta very gently pulling 2 SCVs back, 3 SCVs back. That way he can, you know, maintain a little bit of pressure here, but he's already feeling certain that he's, you know, got this held off. Notice this really nice bunker placement, which allows a whole bunch of SCVs to run in here and block this off. You know, it's not too far to the ramp, so things can shoot at it, but it's still close enough to the ramp that things can't easily run by it. Very, very specific, very strong bunker placement. Again, I think this is a nice standard response if you see a 14 command center, but whatever you do, don't just wing it, you know. Practice this, get the timing down pat, and make sure, for God's sake, that you build this bunker in a good place. A lot of players just sort of haphazardly do bam, throw it down wherever they want. And then they get in situations where they can't exactly repair it. They'll get in situations where, you know, they'll have these little run-bys where things can sneak down here, but, you know, Leta doing everything nice and well. And notice how Call just didn't do anything dramatic. I think that this is the real hallmark of an expert player, knowing what sort of shape that they're in right now. I'm actually going to stop and go on a tangent on this. This is the most common thing that you'll see in really all matchups. Anytime there's some sort of rush or some sort of attack that's that almost always has enough damage to kill 1 base, but not necessarily like everything you have. So for instance, right here, this bunker rush is almost certainly going to kill off that first nexus, given these positions, but probably you're not going to be able to go into the Protoss' base and kill them off with just a handful of Marines and SCVs attacking up a ramp. Or in Terran vs. Zerg, if a Terran bunker rushes the Zerg's 12 hatch, he'll kill it off a lot of times, but he almost always won't be able to run into the Zerg's main to kill off the Zerg, you know, completely. So good players know that this bunker rush is taking a lot of money to do. Therefore, if you can hold it off, or, you know, not die to it, or if you can just stay calm during it, it's actually cost your opponent quite a bit of money as well. I mean, if you think about this in this game, there were 7 SCVs. 3 or 4 Marines were produced in order to hit that top location. Those SCVs weren't mining. They had to build a bunker. That's a lot of money. And really, in Call's situation, he lost 400 here with the Nexus. His time's a little behind because, you know, his gateways were a little behind. But other than that, he's had all his probes mining for the entire time. So this is a lot more even than most players would imagine. Way too many players here just say, oh yeah, you know, Protoss, he's doomed, he lost his Nexus, oh man, let's see if we can see a comeback right now. But it's much more than that. It's actually a pretty even match if the Protoss can time his economy right. So I mean, notice that we only have vultures out now, just now, planting mines. I think that's the smart thing to do. Because if your Protoss opponent hasn't busted out yet, you can advance really far forward with that vulture and plant mines right up in his face. With the expansion only just now going down for Terran. Yeah, look, 1 factory. This is a lot less of a lead for the Terran than you might think. I do think it is a little bit of a lead. Because, you know, you have so much comfort early on as Terran in this spot. I mean, most of the time as Terran, you have to deal with some sort of Zealot Dragoon push at your ramp early on. And once you've held that off, then you kind of have to aggressively take your natural expansion. But no need at all to worry about that. I'm interested by the fact that Leta's getting this many vultures. I actually think that's an unorthodox choice. That's very sort of a stylistic choice. most players are going to get 1 or 2 vultures to lay mines and then just cut right into the tanks. And we see the everything continuing as normal. But, if you look at this, this is still a pretty good situation for Khal. Khal, a.k.a. Goojilla. He's continuing to expand. He has a lot of probe saturation. He has a good Dragoon count. He's getting his observatory. And also in this spot, I don't think it's okay to do anything fancy here. You're already a little bit behind on your gateway count. You need the range. You need to get the observers up. You're a little bit in the dark here. So you should just, go straight for the observers. Make sure nothing insane happens. Because especially against a player like Leta, you're going to be up against a sort of full gamut of possibilities. Second factory being added on, and notice how early that engineering bay was. I mean, we already have a turret up here, we already have a turret building down there at the bottom expansion. And again, this is really smart by Leta. I mean, not only against a Protoss opponent should you be worrying about DTs, because a lot of players, will see the bunker rush and say, oh, I got cheesed, I guess the only way I can win is by counter cheese. And that's not exactly true. I don't even think that this has a Reaver in it, by the way. I think it's just like a scout shuttle. It's just there to freak his opponent out. But not only do you have to worry about Dark Templars in general, but we did see Khal go for Dark Templars against our buddy in 2 games ago in the 4th set on Moonglade. That's actually what we watched right before we watched this game, while we were just waiting for this game to get uploaded. Yeah, look at this nice little scouting shuttle. And, this I just find so brilliant. I mean, I always talk about potential advantages. Like creating a threat that your opponent has to respond to, but then never actually doing anything with that threat. This is like probably the most pure example of that, where you have an empty shuttle floating around your opponent's base, and he has to maneuver everything around. He's really keeping an eye on it, so that way, if a Reaver does pop out, he can kill it immediately, because, most Terrans know that the Protoss is going to be smart and unload that Zealot first, so a lot of times they'll be super focused on that group and be spamming stop to make sure it doesn't fire, so that way they can all shoot the Reaver right when it pops out. But, it's empty, It's just flying around. Khal's just macroing normally. Very smart play. Great way to cut into your opponent's APM, because really, your opponent's hand speed is a resource of his that you can manipulate. If you can get him to spend time on a threat that's never actually going to be there, and that will take away from him doing things like macroing, making SCVs nonstop, focusing on the mini-map, these are all great things to be thinking about. And clearing out the mines. I think clearing out mines is a highly underrated activity. I mean, people talk about it like it just sort of happens, but be aggressive about clearing out mines, Get an extra observer early on. You can scout your opponent around, and with your second obs, just take your Dragoons on a fun little afternoon adventure and just clear out mines. Because I cannot tell you how easy it is to just, be like, oh, well, I'm not going to wander guys over here for some time, or here, so I'll just clear out stuff and then move here. And then later on, when you're expanding here, he sends, 2 vultures, and you're like, oh, hey, no problem. And then you just grab a bunch of guys and send them over here. And there were 4 mines that were planted here right at the start of the game that you could have cleared out. And you lose 2 Dragoons to it. And those are 2 Dragoons that could have easily been saved. So look, barely getting in there with the observer. This is a technique we've seen more and more and more. You'll notice that Leta has this ring of turrets. There's one here, 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 and here, right? It's kind of making this big scoop. And all the factories are nestled right there in the center of it. They're kind of just pumped right there in the nest. So what this means is that with this ring, a lot of times it's difficult to get an observer in here to keep a good count on the factories. And that's why we've seen Protoss players increasingly lump 2 observers directly on top of one another, and then kind of suicide in there. Now, I like this response by Khal. He's getting 6 gateways very early on, and he's getting this Reaver. This is going to allow him to have a big mid-game presence, deal with any sort of big mid-game push that's coming out, and then he's going to start doing a lot of expanding later against Leta. So I think Leta is actually going to end up being a little bit surprised that there's no expansion here. This is kind of funny. The fact that Reaver was the one to help block the ramp. And wow, a Scarab actually went where it was supposed to. Very impressive. Very, very intelligent sort of reavers going on. If you ever are getting a lot of gateways early on, know that you need to have a big scramble plan if your opponent's not doing a mid-game push. I mean, if you get 6-7 gateways early, whether it be on 2 or 3 bases, that's going to do an extraordinarily good job of dealing with mid-game pushes, but it ends up being a little bit kind of if your opponent goes for some sort of just 2 factory straight into a +1 armory type thing. Because if your opponent does do that sort of +1 big maxed army push, what's going to happen is your 6 or 7 gateways will pump out a giant army just in time for a push that never quite comes, and you're just sort of sitting around like, what do I do with my units? So when you're in that spot where you're just sort of in that, what do I do with my units, your economy is going to start falling a little bit behind because you didn't get the expansion up in time. I'm actually going to pause it on these 6 gateways. You didn't get, your extra expansions up. You don't have enough economy to deal with this giant, enormous push. So that's why anytime you're getting a lot of gateways early on, that's totally okay. There's no problem with that at all. But just make sure that you have some big plan to account for if your opponent's going for a not mid-game push. If he's going for expanding and upgrading. Against a mid-game push, you'll be fine. I mean, getting 6-7 gateways early on, that sort of deals with that itself. But I think mid-game pushing on Tornado is an excellent, excellent choice for 2 reasons. First of all, if you look at the map, you have a tough time getting a third. I mean, it might seem a little easy. I mean, you really just have to push out to here in order to take the third. But it's not so easy that you can just do it off 2 factories. You really do need to invest in quite a few mines and quite enough stuff to defend this area, and especially this little high ground pod that's right here. So mid-game pushing is good because it doesn't rely on getting a third early, and if we do this push, that's what's going to allow us to defend this third properly, and we have these little pods in order to abuse some terrain a little bit. So mid-game push, in other words, abuses terrain, and the alternatives are weak. That's a good summary for why we like mid-game pushing on this map. So see, Call's done a nice little cute job. Quite a little brilliant response play. And look at Leta. Look how slowly he's pushing forward. So smart. Almost always when you do some sort of mid-game, early to mid-game push, you'll end up sprinting like halfway there and then super slow pushing all the way up. We see that there's a bazillion gateway units, so the push actually can sprint up to here to this high ground area, but this really is going to be the docking point to advance forward. And this is going to be nice and slow and methodical. This is an excellent, excellent example. I mean, Firebat Hero against Best that we did not so long ago. We also did Haya versus Jangbi. Those were all insanely good examples of nice, slow pushing. So what are we going to do in Protoss' spot? Well, we have tons of gateways worth of units. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. But any little counterattack like this is going to be really strong. Again, I recommend against having your Reavers take full damage from a mine. You need to be a little careful with these sorts of counterattacks, because it's easy to get super overexcited and be like, haha, I know all his units are in the middle, I will kill off all his SCVs. But then you sort of screw up and you lose the shuttle and the Reavers. I mean, that's pretty much what we're going to see here. That's one thing that's really nice about having that completely airtight ring of turrets, is you don't really have to worry so much about that. You only have to have like a tank and a mine, which is all Leta really had there. Look, continuing to push nice and slowly up. But still, this turret I think should have been up a lot earlier. I think that would have helped a lot. That could have saved the lives of a handful more SCVs. Then we have the Scarab moonwalking a little bit before finally advancing forward, killing off those SCVs. Call maintaining focus, his face shiny from sweat from his intense last 2 games. Nice slow push. And, this is obviously what you want to do, just cycling your Dragoons forward and back. You have up 7 gateways being added. That might be an 8th being added in the back. And this is really where I felt like Call started to get super, super brilliant. I mean, he's doing the right thing, popping his Dragoons forward and back. Has a predominantly Dragoon army. That is what you want to be doing. Almost all Dragoons. And then getting Zealots only later when you're starting to get speed. And here the Zealots run in. And right now, I would probably be building Zealots as the Protoss player, because my Dragoons are really going to be staying alive for quite some time. And notice the Zealots are the ones that burn up. And Dragoons, you have to pull back. So I like replenishing Zealots here. A lot of players just get in the habit of kind of hitting ZZD, ZD, you know, but make sure you do that order correctly. You need enough Dragoons. You always need at least like 10, 12 Dragoons, like at the minimum, starting in the mid-game. So that way you can deal with Vultures, you can clear out mines, you can, you know, pick things off if they're a little bit too far forward. And the Zealots are what are going to allow you to run in. So you want to get the 10 to 12 Dragoons first, and then start flooding Zealots. And that even counts for, you know, after your army starts taking a bunch of hits and starts getting depleted. You'll first replenish your Dragoon count, and then begin flooding Zealots. And there we see the Dragoon count sort of rebuilt. Very nice little job of advancing slowly here. So, Khal is going to try to suck as much money out of this expansion as possible. And what we're going to see in a little bit is Khal do movement around this way, which I just absolutely loved. I do think, if I'm in this spot as Terran, I think it just can't hurt to plant a few mines over here. Not up here on the high ground pod, but just a few over here to keep tabs on that. And really, what I would say is that if you weren't doing it beforehand, yeah, no big deal. I think that's fine. I mean, I would not have gone over here to plant mines until I saw this game. And we get to see these amazing counterattacks. Now, one thing to note, look how tightly hugged against this wall Leta is. I mean, Leta is starting here and is just inching along this back wall and is hoping to get a good spot up here. Exactly the way you want to do it. You don't want to force your way in there. You don't want to just suddenly waltz forward and be like, yeah, I can kill him off, no problem. You know, you want to just be very, very patient. No need to kill him, you know, within the next 2 minutes with this mid-game push. You can advance nice and slowly. And that is what we're seeing Leta do. He's always going to be planting a bunch of mines in good positions. And that's one thing that is nice about hugging this edge, is it's very clear where you're going to plant mines. That's actually, I think, another underrated concept that really there's little things that a lot of people don't plan too much of. You know, for instance, Protoss players against Terran players know that they want to have a big concave so that way they can crush in on the Terran army, but they won't really think about, are my Dragoons at the right or the left? Where are the Zealots coming in? Are they slightly in front or behind? That sort of push busting Protoss doesn't think about. And the underrated concept I was going to bring up was, the main one, was planting mines. Where do you end up doing them? A lot of players just put mines in front of their push. In their eyes, they put it in front of their push. So, for instance, if we look at this map right here, you know, Terran tanks will be right here, and they'll just run up here and try to plant mines in front, because they'll think, well, units are coming from above here. I want to make sure my mines can kill those units, therefore I put them in the front. You need to think a little bit more about it. You can't just put it in between you and your opponent and think that you're doing the right thing. Notice that an average pusher might have his tank sieged here and would be pushing directly up like this, and therefore would be planting mines first here, and then there. Notice how he's running into his mines. And you don't want to have to plant a bunch of mines, and as you're advancing forward, kill half your mines off. I mean, that's why Leta's hugging this side of the wall like this, because as he's planting mines in this column, he's never going to run the risk of running over his mines, and he's never going to have to kill those mines off. They're going to maintain utility, right? So look at him, planting right along this column, so that way he can sort of scoot his way up. Incredible, incredible planning job. And nice little mine drags. Khal doing everything he can to sort of stave off the inevitable. But to be honest, this does feel pretty inevitable. This is going to be real difficult to deal with this push, getting to this third. That's almost an undeniable possibility at this point. This is more stuff I like. Remember how in the game we saw beforehand of Khal against Gogo, we saw that Khal once he lost his expansion nexus, he just did a lot of stuff in his main. He got the Templar archives up. He was starting to drop with Reavers and all that sort of neato jazz. Here we're seeing the extra speed shuttles get added. We're seeing the Forge go down. We probably have about 8-9 gateways in our main. Might even be thinking of getting more Reavers. Actually, probably is going to be Reavers in those shuttles right now. We already saw that there were Dark Templar out as well. Yeah, look, there's the Reaver. Look at all the versatility we're starting to tech to. We're not going to just add on more gateways and comfortably sit at our 3 bases. Instead, we're going to maximize as much as we can off that set of resources. With speed shuttles, with these sort of counter-harassment drops. That's one thing that's really nice about having close positions like this. A lot of Protoss players just curse their life when they're close to a Terran because the Terran can just easily push. But never forget that these drop routes are very easy. And if it fails, you can just pop right back just as easily. So Kal is also expanding right here. And I just want you to be aware of that, just to see it on the minimap. Look at Leta doing the smart thing, pushing in there. His drop is doing so much damage. And look at this huge movement. This was the moment where I was just like, oh, Jesus, that is so brilliant. Kal is just sacking this expansion. Notice that there were no probes being made there, and he just takes his entire army and wanders around like that. He goes straight across his high ground pod. He sees that Terran is committed to this very immobile mid-game push that he can't really abandon. And look at this counterattack. I mean, it ends up operating the exact same way as a recall. It's going to draw a whole bunch of Terran units back. We're going to have the opportunity to shoot at the command centers, to get in position at the factories. Look at this nice little transfer going on there. So smart. Once again, with all our gateway units right here, they're going to be rallied to here. So we're going to be able to deal with vultures that try to counter up right here. And if the Terran player, pushes up here, great, we still have those gateway units. If the Terran player tries to swing around this way, this pod gives us access to that area very, very, very quickly. Excellent choice of location to expand to. And look at this amazingly suave, sexy counterattack. And I want you to just mentally note right now that Kal is doing all of this after a 14 Nexus, or should I say a 12 or 13 Nexus, where his opponent bunker rushed and successfully killed the Nexus off. Look at this situation that Kal is in right now. Dealing with this mid-game push so well. Killing all this stuff off, killing off the comsat, such a smart thing to do. He knows he's going to be up against a smaller amount of scan, which means that he's almost certainly going to be able to, exploit Dark Templar for defense, target firing the command center. It's so funny to think that these Dragoons just walked here. They didn't get recalled. They didn't, sneak in. They just got, just waltzed right on up there, and Leta's feeling a little bit bummed out. But, brilliant play, all after what a lot of people would consider an early game blunder or a huge loss early game. And that's one thing that's, I think, perhaps a useful exercise whenever you're watching matches, is just to stop and say, what happened before this point? Really, in any game, say, what happened before this point? For instance, be aware that Leta went for the, for vultures, went for 3 or 4 early vultures with mines and planted a bunch of mines here. Just be aware of that. Be aware of the fact that this bunker rush killed this thing off. Be aware of the fact that these observers managed to sneak in there. Because it helps give you a lot more clarity of what's going on in your own games at the time. Because you'll be Protoss, a guy will bunker rush you and kill off your, 12, 13 Nexus. And you can say to yourself, no, I remember that Kal got into this situation after that happened. I can get into that situation too. You have a lot more sort of objectivity of the situation. And the 4DT drop to kill off the comsat. And at this point, really not much that Leta can do. Just incredible play. Just the 2 counters in the main. First the 1 shuttle reaver drop, then the 2 shuttle drop, and then the big runaround. Just completely crushed Leta. And look, good game. Losing because it doesn't have detection. I just think that was an unbelievably impressive game by Kal. I mean, just such Such calm by call, or by Goojilla, I guess I want to say. So now I only have time for one or two questions. And while we're waiting for those questions to come in, I want to say please submit to me more replays. This is the last day to do so. I'm doing the D to C plus level replay analysis starting tomorrow, and I'll be doing that for a few days. So if you do want to send me one, send me a link on teamliquid.net. PM me there. Make sure the PM title is replay or has replay in it. Have a link to the replay. You can upload it at battlereports.com, I believe. Have the matchup, your rank, and then 3-sentence description of what happened. No more, no less. Just a nice, concise, clear explanation of what went on. And then you may get randomly chosen, because I have quite a lot of submissions. So I'm going to go ahead and use the good old random number generator to grab some. So let's go ahead and mute the chat real fast, because I already have these questions chosen. We're only going to have time for 2, because we did 2 matches today. So None Such says, do you think if Leta had used a vulture drop into the lightly defended expansion, could he have done significant damage? Or, let's see here. I'm not so sure I like drop at any point in this game. Because really, look, there's a few things. Sorry, I'm just waiting for my thoughts to coagulate and to glob into one big explanation. So first of all, you have to think about what am I going to do after the drop? Let's ignore the damage that the drop does. Most of the time you're going to be gearing up towards some sort of expand, because you do have fewer units. You had to spend all this money investing in a starport, and if you invest in a factory, you'd have more production capacity, but you didn't. You're going to really get the starport just for the one shot of making one dropship. So, you have fewer units, like on a map like Moonglaive, you have an easier to defend third. On this map, you really do need quite a lot of stuff in order to properly take a third. So getting a dropship at any point, you have to take that into account of how am I going to deal with the post-dropship harass period. And I think on Tornado that's a little bit difficult. Moreover, if we did kill off our opponent, if we did kill off our opponent's Nexus, if we try to do a drop after that, our opponent's on one base is pretty much going to be prepared for any sort of push at the front or drop at the back, so it's almost certainly not going to be doing any damage. And lastly, I just think that mid-game pushing is so strong, I don't know why you'd want to do any sort of dropship to cut into the effectiveness of that. I like the idea of just going all out with the push, getting 6 factories the way Leta did, and being like a superhero man about it. Always, it's good to consider alternatives like drop, but just make sure that it's not being inconsistent with the logic of the map, more importantly, the logic of what you want to do with your mid-game. And if a huge push is your mid-game plan, a dropship's definitely going to eat into that in a negative way. So let us see here. Let's just take 2 more questions. Groby C says, what do you think is the most important thing to target when you have DTs in a Terran's base that doesn't have detection? Whatever you can, really. I would definitely say that getting the factory add-on is an excellent choice, because it's super safe. It doesn't really have very many hit points. A lot of times it tends to not have detection edit. It's a little hard to say what should you kill if he doesn't have detection, because, for instance, if you're a Terran player and you're dropping a Zerg, then we can clearly say things like, yeah, try to kill off drones, and if not, hit the Evo chambers and the Spire. Those are important buildings. But, at this stage in the game, it's pretty much, like factories and supply depots, and almost always Terran is going to have detection in some locations. And it's really what you can get away with killing that's the big deal. I wouldn't even worry so much about what you can kill. Instead, I would focus on saying something like, what is my drop forcing Terran to do? A lot of times it's to keep the units in his main in locations he doesn't want. You can run Dragoons to the front. You have the opportunity to expand. Those are sorts of things that I really think the DTs shine in. So, So, let's see. People are asking... there's a question by Option US about would I recommend bunker rushing, fast expanding, or 2-fact pushing versus fast expanding Protoss. All 3 of them are fine, really. It's a stylistic choice, I feel. If they're super close, bunker rushing is going to be easier than if they're far away. Any way that you can put pressure on your opponent. I mean, even if you're early expanding, a lot of people would say that fast expanding is the weakest against a Protoss fast expand. That is, if I as Terran try to build my command center really fast after I see you early expanding, they say that's the worst because Protoss is already in the lead economically and you can't put any pressure on them. But still note that most Protoss players are not really going to be getting detection really early on, so you have some freedom with your vultures early. So never really think that there's some awful thing about going 2-factory or fast expand or bunker rush against an early expanding player. Just make sure that you think about what's good and bad about the play and stick to that. Same that we were talking about the dropship early on. So let's just take one more question by Leo J. It says, is there anything you can do to counter that kind of Protoss attack when you're so committed to the front that you're just kind of stuck with a loss? What I would say is to make sure that you have adequate defense back in your main, which a lot of times just involves having a nice ring of turrets. And probably one of the more important things, I think, is if we look back at the screen, the shuttles kind of came in from above, and we had this nice little turret ring right here, but they kind of dropped in the nest. You have all the turrets making a big ring, and it's this place in the middle that really the shuttles are trying to get to. One, because turrets can't hit it there. And two, because this is the, runaway path for all the SCVs. So I don't mind planning 3 mines just below the command center right there. We did see some of that earlier on, but those mines got killed off after that first shuttle harass. But just being prepared for that sort of thing, I think, is super key. So that's how I would deal with the shuttle situation. For the counterattack situation, I really think that the counterattack only worked really well because of that 2 shuttle harass. And I think that if you'd held off the harass adequately as Leta, that you could have just pulled all your army back, killed off the stuff in your main, and then sort of advanced normally. There's a great game between Zelos and Bisu on Zodiac, where Bisu does do a counterattack like that, and it's reasonably effective. It doesn't win the game as it did here. But I think that's a really great example of just seeing this waltz around counterattack, Terran's dealing with it, and then sort of continuing to push without too much of a setback. So I'm going for about an hour now. That's going to go ahead and wrap up Day 9 Daily number 59, and we're going to be doing Day 9 number 60 tomorrow. We're going to be reviewing a bunch of your replay submissions, so feel free to submit those, and we'll be doing that for a few days next week. So thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. And if you missed the Team Liquid Star League cast today, those VODs should be up. I did a little bit of co-casting with Chill. And that's going to be everything I have to say today. Take it easy, guys, and cheers.